More than a week after President-elect Joe Biden was declared the projected winner of the 2020 election, Democratic lawmakers are still pushing the federal government to provide resources, office space, and funding to his transition team. Emily Murphy, the head of the General Services Administration, has not signed off on this key part of the process. Meanwhile, President Trump, who appointed Murphy, continues to refuse to concede. Congressman Gerry Connolly is with us now. He is the chairman of the Subcommittee on Government Operations and the representative for Virginia's 11th District. Thank you very much, Mr. Congressman, for joining us. You and your colleagues in the House, you all wrote a letter to Murphy to get answers. How did she respond to your questions?
She has not responded.
So what does that mean? I think for the average American who's trying to understand, people can understand that the president is pursuing legal options, which is his absolute right to do so with regards to the election. But this bottleneck, where the Biden team says that they are not able to even effectively understand where we are, for example, in this surging coronavirus crisis, what our geopolitical threats are as they stand today, not as they stand from the reporting that we do in the media or that they report on television or the newspapers, but the national security threats and issues facing the country that only the president or his national security advisors or his acting defense secretary can provide to the president-elect and to the vice president-elect. They're in the dark about those things. And so how does that put us at risk, that fact?
It's a great question you're asking. I mean, you just reported, for example, on a new conflict, really an old one, but recently resumed, in Ethiopia and Eritrea and in the Tigray province of Ethiopia. It's creating a refugee situation into Sudan. The Tigray insurgency has spilled over into Eritrea, which could widen that conflict in the Horn of Africa. And the United States, has relationships with all parties concerned. So that's just the latest. An adversary like Russia, like China, like Iran could decide to test the United States during a transition when we are particularly vulnerable, and especially when they know that the outgoing administration is not cooperating with that transition, including in the area of national security and intelligence sharing with the incoming administration and with the incoming president. So, you can ask yourself what could go wrong, and in asking that question, the answer kind of is pretty apparent. There's a lot to be concerned about. The world is always a dangerous place, and we can't afford to be playing games under the technicality that, the election has not been ascertained yet. The election is over. We have a clear winner. It's not in dispute, except with Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump and apparently Emily Murphy. And we need to stop this playing games and get on with the serious business of protecting the American people during a pandemic and making sure our national security interests are addressed.
Representative, over the past 4 years, we've seen this administration ignore, flout expectations, guidelines, responsibilities in many ways. And other than kind of a public finger wagging from Congress, there seems to be very few opportunities or outlets or measures that can be taken to compel the president to do certain things. Do you have any recourse? Is there anything that you can do as the chairman of the Subcommittee on Government Operations to make Donald Trump's administration work with the transition team for the Biden-Harris administration?
We get asked that question a lot by the media, and I'm not quite sure what answer is expected. We're not going to put people on the rack in the basement of the Capitol. We have legal constraints in the ability of Congress to compel, compliance with existing laws and norms. And as you point out, Donald Trump is the first president, really, in many ways, to consciously and almost joyously violate norms, which are, the glue that binds our democratic constitutional form of government. And so, we can issue subpoenas, but subpoenas, if challenged, and this administration has challenged them across the board, have to be adjudicated. And that means you got to go to court, and that takes time. Meanwhile, we've got 64 days until the inauguration of the incoming president. So we don't have a lot of options on the table. If the outgoing president and his team are bound and determined to resist cooperating with the incoming administration, right now there's not a lot we can do to make them cooperate. But I do believe that as we move forward, we're going to have to address this. We're going to have to start to codify behavior in law, because we can't count on norms being adhered to. Norms, by the way, that enshrine respect for our form of government and the will of the American people.
It's an interesting point that you raised, Congressman. I'm looking over here the USGA summary of the fiscal year 2021 justification to Congress, and there's a quote that jumps out at me here: "When GSA does its job well, the American people win." Now, a few days after you and your colleagues sent your letter to Ms. Murphy, Congressman Jody Hice, a ranking member on your subcommittee, sent a response urging Murphy not to sign the paperwork to give resources to the Biden team. Now, you no doubt know that Christopher Krebs, who's a Department of Homeland Security official, was recently fired by the President of the United States for essentially doing his job. He tweeted this: "Honored to serve, we did it right, defend today, secure tomorrow." In other words, he was willing to risk his job to do what he believes is the right thing. In the case of Ms. Murphy, I mean, if she serves at the pleasure of the President of the United States, but I'm struggling to understand why, if this is not helping the American people win, as they say in their justification to Congress, why she would do it, other than she's afraid of losing her job. Is that the only reason?
I can't get into the head of Emily Murphy, but wouldn't it be a refreshing thing if somebody who took an oath to protect the Constitution of the United States saw her job as ensuring the smooth transfer of power after an election, and signs that letter of transition, even if, like Mr. Krebs, she knows that may cost her a job? That's not the end of the world, but it would be an honorable act protecting the country and the will of the voters, and it would show that Donald Trump has not filled his administration with just yes men and women in almost a cultish-like subservience to the glorious leader. Mr. Krebs gives a shining example of what can happen when people follow the dictates of their conscience and the requirements of the country. Ms. Murphy so far has refused to do that, and that's, impeding the ability of a smooth transition. It is putting the country in the middle of a pandemic at risk in terms of public health and in terms of national security, and it needs to stop. She needs to sign that letter, and if Donald Trump doesn't like it and wants to fire her, let it happen. At least you leave with your conscience and your honor intact.
Yeah, typically doing your job as it's prescribed is what allows you to keep it. It's a rare situation that we're in where you do your job, and that means you're putting your career on the line. Congressman Gerry Connolly, thank you so much for spending time with us.
My pleasure. Thank you both.